Well, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some PathOfExile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about patch 3.24's crafting system. Now, there are two main ways that this can be used. The first one is to craft items that already could have existed in previous versions of PathOfExile. If you're interested in a bit of a tutorial on that, streamer Grimro has a video that's worth a look, where he goes through all of the thought process behind attempting to craft a bow that simultaneously has the prefixes tier 1, 2, or 3 to cold damage to attacks, tier 1, 2, or 3 lightning damage to attacks, and tier 1, 2, or 3 fire damage to attacks. I'll put a link to that down in the description. In many ways, what I've been most interested in is the new Haunted Modifiers. These are, broadly speaking, more powerful than anything else you can roll in their slots, and they also have pretty low level requirements. For example, I first found out about the Haunted Modifiers when I was running through Act 5, and it just happened by chance to make this. I can see myself continuing to use Spirit Wrap Battle Plate for a while. That 16% to all resistances does include Chaos, so it's a little bit stronger than it might even look. And this is a very serviceable item through the axe and also into early endgame, although it's certainly not forever gear. But that 16% to all resistances is one of the Haunted Modifiers we're going to be talking about in this video. There are, however, much more powerful Haunted Modifiers, and they're the ones you're probably going to want to roll using this strategy. Because ultimately, 16% to all resistances is very nice to have in the axe, but I think at endgame you'd rather have +1 maximum power charge on your helmet, or +1 maximum frenzy charges in another slot, or a whole bunch of other really strong mods, such as the potentially build-defining +1 mana per 2 maximum intelligence, which certainly doesn't fit every build, but is extremely good in the situations where it does. And that's found as an even rarer helmet mod than the power charge mod. So let's talk about how you get these Haunted Modifiers. Here's a full list of them found on POE. I'll put a link to it down in the description below. They vary in power, some of them are extraordinarily good, like +1 to a maximum charge, and some of them are just okay, like 8 to 12% increased cast speed. What we're going to do though is use the fact that PathOfExile has a hard cap of 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes on an item. What this means in practice is that if you can force an item to have 6 modifiers on it, then it is guaranteed, absolutely guaranteed, that you will get 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes. So with Necropolis crafting, the default state of an item is that it will be crafted with 4 explicit modifiers. So a prefix is an explicit modifier, a suffix is an explicit modifier. What we want to do is apply a few shenanigans to get that up to 6. The reason for that is that when you've got 6 explicit modifiers on an item, you are absolutely guaranteed that you've got 3 prefixes, and also 3 suffixes. But because we're going to be looking at the power charge example, the suffixes don't matter so much. It's just that you absolutely guarantee you've got 3 prefixes. So you're going to want to bury 2 corpses that read +1 explicit modifier. This is really important. There is no substitute for these, but fortunately they're not all that rare. The second thing we need to do is have a look at all of the prefixes that can roll on a helmet. Now I'm going to use a pure strength-based helmet here as an example. Things are a little bit different if you go with one of the other base types. For example, if we look at strength dex, we're going to get slightly different numbers, but the core principles are going to apply here. Just a warning that if there is an intelligence requirement on your helmet, you are going to need to do something about the various mana rolls that can be added into the pool. Those are going to be undesirable, and we'll have to come to that in a sec, because that's important to pay attention to. By default, you have no agency over what type of base that you get from Necropolis crafting, but there are corpses you can bury that will give you that agency. For example, armor items have an intelligence requirement, or armor items do not have an intelligence requirement. If you want a base type that has only one requirement, for example, if you want something that is the same base type as a Samnite helmet, pure armor, then your best way to achieve that is to bury a dexterity banning and an intelligence banning corpse. If you wanted something that has 2 requirements, for example, strength and dexterity, the best way to achieve that is to bury a strength is present and a dexterity is present corpse. It's also critical to remember that by default, all Haunted Modifiers are banned from rolling on an item, but if you bury a corpse that reads armor can roll Haunted Modifiers 50% increased chance of Haunted mods, then it's going to do exactly that. It's going to remove that ban, and it's also going to increase the chance of rolling them by 50%. There's a better version of this as well, which will give you 150%, and that's going to be the superior choice if you can get that. But with our system, you can actually use the 50% ones. It's just the odds will be a little bit worse. And over time, I think that the PathOfExile Trade League economy will start to reflect this difference in power between the two. Okay, so our desired prefix is +1 maximum power charges. This has a drop weight of only 250. Let's have a look at the various mods that can roll on a pure strength-based helmet to start with. Here you'll see that the prefixes total 39,275. In short, there's not much chance of getting this mod, even if we increase the chances of getting it by 50% or even 150%. If we increase it by 150%, then suddenly the odds of this mod go up to 625. But that's 625 in about 40,000, which is about 1.5%. Now that's for each mod that we roll, and we are going to get 3 mods on the item, but I think we can do much better than that. What we're going to do is something that will be intimately familiar to those of you that have ever crafted a +3 bow. You'll know that on those sorts of bows, what people tend to do, at least the most common way of doing it, is to use essences to get +2 to the level of all bow skills. One thing you may notice is that when you look at the non-attack modifiers that are available on bows, there's actually only one of them that's a prefix, and that is +1 to the level of all socketed gems. So what players tend to do, if they want to force this onto an existing bow, they'll use the meta mod that bans the rolling of attack mods. And then they'll hit this thing with an exalted orb. And the only valid prefix that can be added is going to be +1 to the level of socketed gems. You need to do a little bit of playing around first, but keep that concept in mind. We're banning every mod except for the ones that we want. Now what we're going to be doing with the Haunted crafting is less deterministic than that, but still very, very powerful. We're going to be biasing heavily against the mods we don't want. So for defenses on our armor-based helmet, various things that are defenses tagged have a very high sum of weight. In fact, they add up to 24,000 weight. Life tagged ones add up to 13,000. Physical tagged ones are pretty considerable as well. What do we get if we focus on making these scarcer? So let's say we bury corpses that give 1800% scarcer on the defenses, 1200% scarcer on the physical, and 1500% scarcer on the life. The reason for this imbalance is that it reflects just how common these mods are by themselves. Now we hit Necropolis Grave, and this is on the website POE, which I'll link to down in the description below, and you'll see something interesting happen. Instead of 39,275 points worth of mods, it drops down to 5,226. Now you're still thinking at this point, that is not enough. We're only going to have 625 weight, even if we use 150% corpse. This is starting to look like 1 in 10 for each mod that we select. However, if you look a bit closer, you'll also notice that increased item rarity is by far the largest percentage of this. So once you roll 1 rarity mod, that is going to ban all of the other rarity prefixes from rolling. And that means that your last 2 prefixes, assuming that you hit rarity on the first one, are going to have a much higher chance of being the desired power charge mod. So that's something important to keep in mind. You're certainly not guaranteed, but this system is rigging the odds considerably in your favour. We're not talking about 1.5% for every prefix. We're starting to look more like 10-15% for each prefix. In short, all of those scarcer mods are making the mod we actually care about something like 10 times more common than it would otherwise be. And that's a good spot to be in. By using this combination of 1200% scarcer physical mods, 1500% scarcer life mods, and 1800% scarcer defense mods, which is only a bunch of relatively common corpses, we can make the odds of getting the desired power charge mod much higher. Remember that we have got 6 mods, and therefore we are guaranteed 3 prefixes, and that's because the very first 2 corpses we're using are +1 explicit mod. Now, one very important reminder that if you have a helmet that has any energy shield at all, i.e. its intelligence requirement is not equal to 0, then in this case, mana is not banned on it, and so you'll need to focus on making mana scarcer as well. Otherwise, you're going to end up missing out because your first mod will probably be mana, your second mod probably be rarity, and then you've only really got 1 prefix that's got any realistic chance of being the power charge mod, and whilst that chance is not 0, it's not as high as it would be if you put some effort into pseudo-banning mana by making it much scarcer. So what do we do from there? Maybe we get extremely lucky and we've accidentally created a masterpiece like this Miracle Halo lacquered helmet that someone's got listed for trade in Necropolis at the moment. That has genuinely good mods in the other slots. That's probably not going to happen. It can happen, and you can bias it towards being more likely that you'll get these sorts of good mods if you use some of the other tech that Grimro talks about in his video, such as using tier rating to ban some of the undesired mods like low tier life rolls from the pool. But more likely than not, you're going to end up with something like Phoenix Visor Callous Mask, which is not currently in all that usable a space. You can certainly stick this one on your character and it will function, but it's not something that you're going to consider long-term gear. It's something you might just use for a little while on a power charge stacker. What would you do from here? The answer is simple: the Split Beast. The Split Beast is the answer here because it's a way that you can get rid of a lot of the undesired mods and then put yourself in a situation where you've got further options in order to craft this. Or alternately, if you end up getting good prefixes through pure RNG, so you get +1 maximum power charges, but maybe you also get a good tier life roll and some other things like that, then at that point, you could then use an Eldritch Orb of Annulment to surgically remove a suffix from the item. Anyways, the key takeaway from this is that percentage scarcer mods, especially if the number on them is quite high, can be extremely powerful. If you use them to pseudo-ban mods that you don't want to roll, they will then make it so that it's more likely to get any special mod that can roll on that item. And of course, one final thing you might be interested in doing here is also combining this tech with 25% chance to fracture an explicit modifier, and then maybe you'll end up lucky enough to wind up with a 6 mod item where 5 of the mods are trash, but the last mod is a fractured +1 power charge on your helmet. And of course, if you're willing to explore other slots, you could go for +1 maximum endurance charges on boots, +1 maximum frenzy charges on gloves. There's a whole lot of other options, although I do think the most powerful is probably +1 maximum power charges on a helmet. One last thing that hasn't been tested yet, we don't know if this is compatible with the Warlord influence +1 power charge mod. I can find nothing indicating that this is in a mod group that would make it incompatible with that, but I'm certainly not going to guarantee that Grinding Gear Games haven't thought of that, because they might have some sort of hidden way that they can't be found on the same item. May your Necropolis crafts have interesting results.